Hi, I'm Sally Treanor, and this is the Watercolor series. And we've been working on all kinds of paintings that are non-objective, and they start with marking paper, actually with doodles, with different kinds of tools and resists and things like that. And we're going to show that now. And this is all based on some lessons from Stan Kurth, who really was trying to teach people how to paint intuitively rather than with full direction. So let's begin. One of the things I like to do is establish maybe color, but also areas of resist. And in my case, I'm going to use some colored crayons today because I want those colors to remain. But I'm also going to use a white crayon, and that's just plain wax that is going to be a resist on the paper. And I really can't see what I'm doing, but I'm going to make a whole bunch of marks with white. But let me show you just maybe what kinds of things I might do with a colored crayon. Just doodles. They don't have to be anything in particular. Try not to overdo the doodles. And make sure if you're adding color, make sure the color is something that you enjoy and want to have in your painting, because these colored doodles are going to remain no matter how many layers I put in. Also some green doodles. I'm going to try doing some circles because I like circles a lot, and I'll make different size circles. I've already kind of decided on a theme for this because it's a theme I use a lot, and that would be koi. So you're not going to see koi at any time soon, but you will eventually. If you don't have colored crayons, you certainly don't have to use colored crayons unless you want to. And I'm trying to distribute these colored circles pretty much all over. I'm also going to use some water-soluble graphite. And this is kind of powdery, putty-like stuff that it's not easy to draw with, but it's easy to smudge around. And so I'm just going to apply it to the paper in various shapes, smudge it in. This is water soluble, so when I come back in with a watercolor layer, it'll dissolve and it'll become part of actually the color. I'm going to use other things that are water soluble, more or less. This is a calligraphy pen that is not permanent ink, and so I'll do some of this, and what it will seem to be, when I go over it with water, it'll start to bleed. It won't disappear entirely. I'm pretty much always an organic sort of painter rather than a structured painter. So my drawings and paintings don't have a lot of sharp edges or straight lines. So I'm not inclined to doing that. But in this stage, I'm really just using this as a warm-up time. And I hope I'm making interesting enough marks so that when they either resist or dissolve into the paint layer, they will give interest to that. And it doesn't have to make any sense. Another one of the things that I do is I absolutely have a resist in these little dots, and they will pick off, after I paint. So these are going to be white areas on the paper that are going to be left. The other way I can make that happen, and I'm not going to do a lot of this because I like actually to have a variety of things that I've applied a resist this to. Another thing that I do is I use tape at this point. So this is kind of a big piece, but it'll be real noticeable when we get to the stage that we're putting things together. Here's a different piece and two different shapes. I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to where these go, except I'm not lining them up. I'm not giving them the same direction. I'm trying to get variety even in these little resist shapes so that they don't become boring when we have areas of paint around them, because they will show up as white. I'm not going to do a lot of this right now because I don't want that much white in the painting. I want probably color instead. I think that about does it for the kind of resists I want to have right now. And incidentally, this is a graphite pencil. It doesn't have any wood around it. That's the whole thing is graphite. And I think I'll make a few more marks with that because it's not completely water soluble, so it'll remain. And just because I had a whole bunch of space over here in which I hadn't done anything. Okay. So I'm going to switch to a mop. And just to reiterate, this is an Escoda Aquario. It's an 18. It's what they call a mop brush, and it has really great ability to hold huge amounts of water, and it comes to a fine point when it's wet so that I can make strokes that are just all kinds of beautiful strokes that have variety in them. I'm going to make my watercolor layer warm, and just to give you a heads up ahead of time, I'm going to spatter, I'm going to spray, I'm going to do all kinds of things. I'm going to put salt on it. I'm just going to do all kinds of things that will give a lot of variety to what happens here. So let's just get into, I'm going to be triadic here, but I'm not going to stick to just a very limited palette. This is going to be, when I say triadic, I really mean a red, a yellow, blue, a primary triad. So let's just start applying paint. You can already see that resist is happening. I'm going to use a lot of different reds. I've already used permanent rose. Now I'm coming in with Windsor red. You can see the difference. What a saturated red. That's fabulous. For yellows, I will go back to Quinn Gold, which I like a lot. Very, very strong, warm yellow. I'm coming in wet. I'm not doing much blotting of my brush ahead of time, and I'm touching what's there and letting the colors mingle. I think that this is a good way to apply good saturated paint. Let's come in with French ultramarine now. I will come up next to areas. I might drop in color now, but I'm not going to go over what's there. Because I have my board on a slant, that blue is running into my yellow. And I'll at some point wick up that excess blue because it's going to go beyond my expectations and what I want to have happen with the blue. I think I'll do that now. See, it almost decimated that area of yellow I just added. So by wicking it up, it won't be quite so fierce in adding itself to what's below it. Okay, back into the yellow. Let's see if we can get more yellow happening down here. Okay, now where do we want to emphasize things? This is still pretty all wet and we want to keep it that way for a while. But I'm going to switch to smaller brushes so I have more control over the water. I'm going to come back in with some of this nice blue. And I see that this has already dried up a bit right up here. So we want to wet that again. So we have good merging and flow of color. I don't want this area to be unrelievedly blue, but I do want it to be blue. But let's see what happens over here when we put some of that in here. And we put some of it down here and over here. So I'm just splattering now. And let's do that with some of the other colors we've got going on. Here, we'll do it with some red up in the blue, see what happens. Sometimes things are so much fun. It's really fun to keep doing it. And then let's do some of that yellow. And you know, the harder you hit your finger in the splattering, the bigger the drops are going to be. Let's do some salt. Some of this is already too dry for the salt. But it's not too dry. I don't think anyway. For the alcohol. So first we'll spray it a bit. Try it on the really dry parts. I just sprayed my palette. And then let's also just dab places. So that'll be a bigger piece of alcohol that's moving stuff out of the way. I've got kind of a nothing here, you know, it really isn't reading as anything in particular. Except I am getting now some interesting patterns from the alcohol spray that I put on. And it's little tiny starbursts of lighter areas. So now I'm covering up a layer of color. And when I do my gouache over that, that will preserve that area. And once again, you're going for variety of placement and what you're covering up. You don't want too many clusters that will all be the same. I didn't have much happening down here in this area, so I'm going to start with a couple here. And I've got really some, this is probably my bow to how fond I get of the special effects that the salt and the spraying give me. But I am going to do something radical, but I'm still putting on these new little resist areas. Anytime you create something that's going to remain the same, you can always go back and correct that at the end. So don't be afraid of doing that. Okay, this is the radical thing I'm going to do here. I don't want to leave anything to chance here. So I'm going to draw some fish. And I've got a green watercolor pencil, word watercolor pencil, because I want it to disappear. And I'm going to look at areas that will make interesting fish bodies. Okay, I've got one fish there. I think I'll have one fish kind of just coming into the scene here. Let's do another fish here. I think I'll have another fish here, or at least part of a fish. Now, the other thing that I decided was I'm going to use throwaway trays for mixing my tinted paint. Let's see if I can get what kind of mix I can get with my white and my black gouache. Okay, now I think I'm going to mix a little blue with that. I'm just thinking as I look at this that I want a kind of neutral but low intensity. And you have to remember not to paint over the lines that you put in for your for your objects. I'm not sure that this was all a good decision of what the subject matter should be, but I think I like it. But I like fish. So I've already covered up some perfectly gorgeous stuff. Well, I'm liking this guy. This is a cute guy. I'm using an awful lot of paint. It's not that it's bad to use a lot of paint, but you know how I am.
Ellie, you know how you pick out to make that kind of glittery look? Could you put glitter on?
What do you mean by actual glitter?
Uh-huh.
You know, sure. If you weren't trying to, keep it pure, transparent watercolor.
Right. That's a lot of picking to do. It looks so nice, but
The other thing is, some people do use Misket for that, and they use it right out of the bottle and splatter it so that at the end they're getting that same result. I saw a demo on YouTube not too long ago that did that. And it was quite effective. And of course, I mourn every place I cover up something that I loved. But we still don't know what's going to happen when we take off the little pieces of resist. So I have to dry this. And I've kind of changed how much black is in the mix as I've gone along. So this area is pretty just light, and it's gotten darker as I've gone over here. And I did that on purpose, just for interest. And I might even come back in later and do more of that because I like that brush strokes and the way it looks now. I also see some areas where I'm going to cause trouble for myself when I pick off the tape resists, but I can always correct those.
Oh, nice. I like the lines going through it too, the fish.
And see, that was just my doodles.
Uh-huh.
That looks great. So I'm liking this guy quite a bit, and I now that I see what happened with the gouache layer that lets the fish shine through, I've gotten all the babies I killed.
So on the fish with the big line through it in the top, you had it, did you have tape on there and you took it off?
Right, I've taken off the tape every place it was.
Okay.
And I came back in because that was tape on white paper. I came back in and I tinted that area on the fish, and I might come back in. Well, I'll do it right now. Let's see what happens. That's better. I think the yellow is better. But any place I see something that isn't working right, I can come back in with watercolor and correct the colors and do other things.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, they are.
But you
Mhm.
see how having just kind of let myself go on the first instance,
Mhm.
those first layers, how beautiful they are. Once you add all that neutral gouache, you're really letting the watercolor shine through.